I'm Kevin Power, and this is SaskScapes, the podcast featuring stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. Hey, welcome back to SaskScapes. This is the 8th episode in a series of special SaskScapes podcast presents entitled German Culture Alive, all sponsored by the Saskatchewan German Council. You can hear all the other episodes in this series by downloading SaskScapes from your favorite podcasting app. The Saskatchewan German Council is a provincial nonprofit umbrella organization to nearly 40 member groups, representing all people of German-speaking backgrounds. By engaging people of all ages to become active and involved partners in a vibrant multicultural community, the SGC is committed to the preservation and promotion of the German language, traditions, and culture for all people of Saskatchewan. You'll find the link to their website in the show notes. When you think of life in a religious abbey or monastery, what comes to mind? Maybe it's the Nürnberg Abbey in Salzburg, Germany. That's the nunnery made famous all around the world through the movie The Sound of Music. Those fortress walls, the cavernous interior, the silence. While it's true, abbeys such as these do exist around the world, make no mistake, not here in Saskatchewan. However, we do have a monastery with quite a history, found in the village of Munster, about 120 kilometers east of Saskatoon. The town gets its name after the city of Munster, Germany. There you will find St. Peter's, the oldest Benedictine monastery in Canada. St. Peter's has been on my wish list of guests ever since I started this podcast series in 2014, and it is because of this series, German Culture Alive, I've come to learn of the German connection to St. Peter's history. In this episode, I'm joined by Abbot Peter Nowoskowski and Father Lawrence de Mong as they share the history of St. Peter's from its early days to life as it is today. We'll also get a glimpse into the Benedictine order and what a typical day is like for them. I can't help but admire their commitment to the walk in faith. No matter your own belief system, there's much to learn during our conversation. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that nothing could be more sweet than the Abbey's own honey hut. So, to begin with, why don't you both introduce yourselves?
I'm Abbot Peter Nowoskowski, the Abbot of St. Peter's Abbey, the Benedictine monastic community that's been here in Munster for more than 100 years, about 120 some years now. So that's who I am.
Now, you've not been there since the beginning because you don't appear to be quite that old.
Just about, but I've only been here 60 years. That's half the time.
Okay, good. Because you don't look nearly 100 yet. And Lawrence?
Lawrence de Mong.
Yeah.
And that last name is D, capital D-E and a capital M.
Right.
So it's got some Alsace-Lorraine blood in me.
Aha.
And so my family came out of Iowa and Minnesota, and I was born here, second generation.
Right. Well, that's a good segue into where I'd like to begin with this conversation. And I will say just from the beginning that this is part of the German Culture Alive series within the SaskScapes podcast, which is something that the Saskatchewan German Council is sponsoring. So in earlier episodes, we talked extensively about the presence of Germans in Saskatchewan, particularly those who were Germans living in Russia, who found their way to Saskatchewan via the bordering American states. such as Iowa, Minnesota, and all those areas. So, so we covered a lot of that history already. So we don't really need to go back on that. The second thing I do want to say is St. Peter's, as well as Saskatoon, is both on Treaty 6 territory. And because we will talk a little bit about colonization as far as the history of the area is concerned, I just wanted to acknowledge that straight up. And so with that, I will largely let you guys drive this beast. And either of you can tell me about the magic that began in the the turn of the 20th century, I suppose.
Well, I can start if that's okay with Lawrence.
Sure.
So, St. Peter's Abbey was founded in 1903. And the year before that, 1902, one of the monks from St. John's Abbey in Minnesota accompanied some land, not speculators, but land companies. Land seekers, because there was opening for settlers in Saskatchewan.
Right.
And so there was a monk who came along with them there from Minnesota who wanted to have a Catholic presence and Catholic pastors to serve them.
Right.
And so they made a couple of scouting trips. The first scouting trip from Winnipeg all the way up to Calgary. And then they ended up in Rostern. And then by horse and trailer, they went into the present colony area. And so the whole idea was to found a Catholic colony, mainly for people from Stearns County in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the starting of it. And so the first monks, there was about 8 or 9 monks at the very beginning, living very primitively in a log cabin at first.
Mm.
And so they tried to help. So this is the astounding thing for me, within 9 months of arriving here, they established a German newspaper called the St. Peter's Bote.
Right.
And the editor lived in Rostern. The paper was printed in Winnipeg, and it was distributed by the monks here at Munster. So that was before the age of internet.
Right, yes.
All those distances to cover. But anyway, part of the idea of the German newspaper, the Bote, was to send it to people in Minnesota and the States to attract new settlers to come here, because the Canadian government wanted to open up Saskatchewan and the western provinces of Canada, which were, and this area that we're living in, the colony, was mainly uninhabited by European settlers. I think there was certainly some native people here.
Right.
But so there was about 50 townships, I think, that was bought up eventually to form the St. Peter's colony. And the monks were part of that, and they established a monastery. They were the first post office. They set up a farm to feed themselves. And then the newspaper, I said, within 9 months, 1904. And then by 1921, they set up a college, St. Peter's College. It was basically a high school because there were no high schools in the area at that time. And it was a residential school for neighboring farmers and their descendants. And then a few years later, in 1924, I think it was, there was the German, also an English newspaper, the Prairie St. Peter's Messenger, which became the Prairie Messenger.
Right.
And so for about 20 years, there was both an English and a German newspaper that was published and edited by the monks here at Munster.
Right.
Anything to add, Lawrence?
Well, I could say that my mother was born here in Munster.
Uh-huh.
And when I said that I'm second generation, that's not entirely true. My dad was born in Minnesota, in one of the towns, I think it was Winona, Minnesota, and moved up here probably after all this information had come out. But I think it was in 1905 that they got to Saskatchewan, my dad and his family.
And your dad met your mom in Munster, not, they hadn't met
Actually, what
previously.
happened was they picked up and went out to where I was born, about 60 miles from here, or 100 kilometers, somewhere around there, in Cudworth, a little town out there. That was part of our diocese, that little area that was chosen as Abbey Nolius.
Right.
Now, maybe that's something we should talk about. That the Prince Albert diocese was huge in the west here, and they chipped a piece off and encircled our abbey and made what it was called a separate diocese, but it was a Abbey Nolius, where the abbot was the abbot Nolius, meaning of no place. He was no diocese, yeah.
But was St. Peter's in Munster the only Benedictine order to form during that time, or were there other areas of Saskatchewan where there were Benedictine monks that had also?
This is the only place that we settled, and we settled in 1903, and then in 1912, a Benedictine abbey started in Quebec, out of France. And then in 16, no, did I say 6? I meant 19.
Yeah.
And then in 1936 or somewhere around there, another Benedictine abbey started in British Columbia. So there's only 3 Benedictine abbeys as such in Canada.
And this was the first.
And this was the first one.
Wow. Groundbreaking.
Now the other ones, like for example, the Oblates and the Redemptorists, which are different religious communities, they came here too. I think the Oblates were here before we were, because they were mainly in the north.
Missionaries, in the far north, and to where Prince Albert is now.
Right.
They came through very early, along with the Grey Nuns.
Right.
But they're set up differently than Benedictine monks are, because they're more pastoral and missionary and working in parishes.
Right. And did you both grow up on farms?
Yes. And my heritage is German-Russian too, by the way.
It is. Originally, your family, from what part of Russia would they have come?
Well, near the Sea of Azov.
Yes.
Where a lot of the fighting, Mariupol, where there was a lot of fighting.
Yes.
That's where my great-grandfather would have been from.
Right. And Lawrence, your family?
That was like Alsace-Lorraine. I'm not sure. I came here with a little bit of French left in my name, but both my parents spoke German.
Have you been to the Benedictine Abbey in Quebec?
Oh, yes.
Well, you probably all visited, I would expect, because there's not a massive community.
I studied at Laval University. Because of that name. Our abbot at the time said, well, we need a French teacher who will send you. And that's all I had of French. But I learned it. It was taught already in high school, but they needed somebody with a degree so they could teach on the level of the university in Saskatoon. The U of S is affiliated with us.
Yes. So tell me, how do 2 young lads growing up on farms find their way to devoting their life to the Benedictine order?
Well, if I start, I can say 2 miles from our home was our school. We went by horse, and it was named St. Benedict School. 6 miles from our place, I went to church. It was named St. Benedict Church.
Right.
And 9 miles from our place was a little town closest named St. Benedict.
Right.
I don't know what was up with those Benedictines, but they had a Benedictine thing on their mind. And so I grew up thinking Benedict. And then when my brother wanted to go to high school, he could only find a place that was in Saskatoon, and stayed with my grandmother. And we were 10 kilometers from the nearest high school at that time, 10 miles from the nearest high school. So I put my application in early, plenty early, to get here in grade 9 so that I could go to high school.
Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode. You would have been downright rebel had you chosen otherwise, given all of those of those signs.
I was brainwashed into being
right. So in other words, you're here today simply because you had no choice. Right.
Well,
What about you, Peter?
Come to think of it, well, first of all, our pastor was a Benedictine from here, so that was about 20 kilometers away from here. And he drove out every Sunday or with horses, depending, by car later on. But it so happens, I never thought of this before, but our parish is named St. Scholastica. And Scholastica was a twin sister of Benedict.
Oh, really?
But anyway, I don't know if there's much of a connection there. My cousin had joined the community here a few years before I did. And so when I finished grade school, I wanted to go to high school, and my parents wanted me to go as well, too. There were no high schools in our area, and it was before the time of school buses. And so I came here to St. Peter's College as a resident student, as many other people did, because it was kind of the only viable solution if you wanted to go to high school. And so after those 4 years of high school and 1 year of arts, university arts, so then I decided to join the community here.
Did the two of you cross paths growing up at all?
No.
And I was quite a bit older. I'm 85 and
77. 77.
So you see, there was a little space there.
Right.
And I was already in the seminary, I think, when Peter entered.
Right. So when you both, Lawrence, you would have entered first. How many were in the order when you, at St. Peter's when you entered?
I always guess at about 60, 65, something like that. The building we're in right now was just finished when I was ordained a priest. So during that time, we would come home and we'd live in the old school because there was no room. The monastery and the college were in one big building, okay?
Yeah.
And the poor monks were being hammered by those students from the bottom and from the top. And so that's one of the first things they wanted to do is build their own building. Well, that came during my seminary, so that when I got ordained in 1963, I came into this beautiful new building.
Right. And so that building was... Yeah, that building was already there then when you came along, Peter.
And so I came along in 63, and so I was part of the first people who lived in the monastery.
As a novice. See, he was beginning. I was finished my studies.
That was after my first year arts.
Right.
How long does one stay as a novice before you join the order?
1 year as a novice, and then 3 years in temporary vows.
Yes.
And after that, you make solemn vows. So that's 4 years of formation before making a final commitment.
All our formation in terms of study was at our mother house, or the place that was responsible for founding us in Minnesota, St. John's Abbey. And, even though they came from another area, we always considered them as our mama, mother. And I would say that that relationship continues today. We have a seminarian who's studying there right now.
So are there some students that would come from Minnesota to study at the college there now?
Not the reverse, no.
No students came here, but some of the newly ordained monks at St. John's came here at the request of the abbot to help minister to the growing population in this area, to minister at the parishes and to help in the school, etc. So some of the monks did come and join St. Peter's, transferred their vows to St. Peter's from St. John's to expand the community and to add to the workforce, so to speak.
How does one become an abbot within an abbey?
Well, when the other abbot resigns or dies,
yes,
then there's an election that is held.
Oh, okay.
And so it's an election process among the finally professed members of the community.
And how many are you now? I don't think you're 60 now, are you?
No, we're down to about 13 right now.
Yeah.
And so we're facing the same problem or the same issue that many other religious communities are facing as well.
Yeah.
And so, 13 is our number now.
Yeah. Well, I was going to get to that eventually, but since we're there, what's that challenge like? I mean, you've got the college there, which has, tremendous programs of study covering a vast variety of courses and subjects and career paths. But I don't assume that all the people that are at the college are looking out of their windows at you all thinking, I think our next path is to go there. So it can't be assumed that because you've got a lot of young people around in the area, that's definitely going to translate into more members within the Abbey. So how is that a concern being addressed? Are you sometimes concerned that this is something that will eventually fade away?
When I joined here in Lawrence as well, all the teachers and staff at the school, St. Peter's College, were monks.
Yeah.
So we've staffed everything. Right now, they're all lay people. So there's one monk, Brother Kurt, who teaches psychology, but all the others members. So the college pretty well exists almost, you could say, independently by hired lay staff from the president all down. Forget the other question.
Well, I guess my question is, what does outreach look like now?
Okay.
There's no doubt about it that when we staffed everything, we had more influence on the young people and had more options for young people who are growing up to join us, a place like this. So it's difficult. We have to find new ways of making ourselves known. I think that's undoubtedly true.
Right.
On the other hand, when you look at the pews in most churches,
yes,
they're suffering the same way.
Right.
So what do? Well, we have a larger area where we're drawing from. So we haven't had a vocation from our immediate area in ages.
I'm the last one 60 years ago.
Okay. And almost, I would say, all of our monks who joined from Canada joined from our little diocese.
Right.
At first. Now they're coming from other provinces.
And now it's totally different.
Winnipeg.
We haven't had anybody from our own.
Really?
No, for a long time. Like he said, he was the last one from our area to join.
Yeah. What do you count? How do you account for that? How is that happening that so many from outside of the province are looking at you folks?
Well, I think a lot of them probably, we have a website And so I think some of them contact us through the website.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm the vocation formation director right now. And I would say I get about 25 to 30 inquiries a year.
Mm-hmm.
But about 1/3 to 1/2 of them come from Africa, or they come from Nigeria, or they come from wherever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a cultural thing that is very difficult in immigration, so that we can't accept people from outside of Canada, I think, because of immigration procedures.
Right.
And so I do get in just this past week or 2 weeks, I got an inquiry from someone, and most of them are older people in the 30s and 40s. So one came from Toronto, and the other one is from Quebec. And so I respond to them. So somehow they have seen our website and made a contact, and they write me, and then I invite them back to come for what we call a live-in. So they get acquainted with us, which would be a visit of 1 to 2 weeks. So we get to know them, they get to know us, and then if it looks promising, then we continue from there. So right now, we do have a candidate coming from Edmonton, for example, and he just emailed me. He had been here last year, and he emailed me that he's coming again next Saturday, arriving in Saskatoon. So that's our latest candidate, is from Edmonton.
Now, if people have immigrated from countries like Africa and Nigeria already, and they're living in a part of Canada and they've become Canadian citizens, they're eligible to come and meet with you.
It's not a matter of eligibility. You have to get used to the culture. You have to get used to winter time, and sometimes for immigration, I mean, it's the Canadian laws that doesn't allow an easy process. Right. So I always say shop locally if you want to join a monastery.
Right. So now the deep dive into the questions that make me curious. And this may also help people that are thinking about this kind of life for themselves. And the question is, what's life like there for you now? Because, there's that image of an abbey or a monastery being these great cavernous brick walls that are echo and austere, and nobody speaks a word. And, there's prayer time several times a day. And in between that, it's all very reflective and quiet and pensive and nods and very few words spoken and things like that, which is not the case. Yes. Please tell me that's not the case.
Well, you've been watching some of the media and movies, no doubt.
Yes. Well, The Sound of Music, you grew up on that. You think of,
Your description did remind me of the Trappists.
Yes, exactly.
A neighboring monastery in Manitoba.
Yes.
Where that was very true, I think.
Uh-huh.
And they are Benedictines of a much more strict observance.
Yes. Yeah.
And they were the first to die out in the West here. They just couldn't carry on.
Right.
That was within the last year or so. So that's the struggle. What kind of lifestyle are young people or middle-aged people looking for to find God?
I would say that the most difficult thing for people becoming a monk is to live community life.
Yeah.
And especially they're older, they live by themselves, but also in our own culture, there's so much stress on individuality and individualism.
Uh-huh.
And but there are some people who are attracted because the latest candidate who have applied from Quebec said, I want to simplify my lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's attracting him to a monastic lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be able to not only seek God, but you also have to be able to get along with your neighbor. And sometimes, there's shoulders to rub and elbows to watch out for.
Sure. You mean even there? Surely not.
Not literally, of course, but
Right.
figuratively.
Yeah. Well, but it's a curious thing because we're also living in an interesting time where I observe that people have been so bombarded, with technology and just constant 24-hour news cycles and such a rapid paced life that there sort of is this slow creeping a pendulum swing to simplify one's life, to downsize, and that's very interesting. And it would be interesting to see. It's good to hear that people that are looking at the monastic lifestyle, and particularly you folks, are looking at it largely because they do want to simplify their life.
Now, the motto of Benedictines is in Latin ora et labora, which is pray and work.
Right.
And so that whole idea is to kind of lead a balanced lifestyle. So it's a disciplined lifestyle between praying and working together or working at our regular jobs. Sometimes, depending what your job is, you're working by yourself. But I think balance and moderation are two keys to the Benedictine spirituality.
Uh-huh.
And so we try to live that. And at the same time, I would say that Benedictines have not avoided new things in our cultures. I mean, I have an iPad and I have a computer. So,
yes.
And I think Benedictines through the ages, and we have a history of 1,500 years and more, they have been innovators as well too. And sometimes it's in education, and sometimes it's in gardening, whatever the case might be. And so I think that it's not always just looking backwards in terms of our tradition as Benedictines, but it's also looking at the present and looking ahead, how we can influence and help society.
What's the beginning of a typical day like there? I know you start very early with prayer, which is
we get up
15.
We get up at 6, and then the first prayer is 6:20.
6:20, okay.
Now, when people think that's early, as you just mentioned, I know lots of my nephews and nieces who go to work at 5 o'clock already. So I don't think we are always that early. So we have 6:20. We have a call lauds or morning prayer, then mass at 7 o'clock, and then breakfast after that.
Yeah.
The next prayer time is at 12 o'clock, short noon prayer, and then followed by lunch, dinner. And then the next prayer session is Vespers at around 5:30, followed by supper. And then the final one is Vigils at 7:30. And so it does intersperse our daily routine and work sessions and personal reflective time fill up the rest of the day.
I gather you're not getting Meals on Wheels delivered, so I'm guessing somehow you figure out a way to divide up cooking chores.
Well, we
actually have hired people to do the cooking for us.
You do?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They wouldn't. We wouldn't eat our own cooking. No, we also have college students here, and we also have guests that come. So sometimes there's up to 50 or 60 people on a weekend that have to be fed, and so that would be more than we could handle ourselves. But we do have 2 cooks regularly.
But engaging and looking at your website, you do have quite an engagement with the local residents. I mean, there's not a huge dividing line between us and them sort of thing. You seem to have a lot of involvement within the community itself.
The fact that we were pastors from the beginning meant that we always had that engagement with local people.
Yeah.
And same thing with the school. You were engaged with the local people. And so I think that has continued. So as Father Lawrence mentioned before, it's more the Trappists who have more an isolated, separate lifestyle, whereas we as Benedictines in North America have always been, I think, engaged with the local people in some sort of ministry. For example, Father Lawrence now is hospital chaplain in Humboldt, and so he's engaged half time right now in that.
Right. But there is time for fun and games. You're not all business. You do I know, and you have some wonderful activities, especially during the summertime. You mentioned the gardening there, and my particular favorite, the honey hut, which sounds like a place of reflection all on its own. And I'm assuming in the dead of winter now they're all in hibernation, all having a sleep. But during the summertime, that's quite an active, pardon the pun, busy little beehive you've got there.
Well, it's busy enough. That is true.
Yeah. And so you produce a lot of honey that you just keep for yourselves, or you know where I'm going with this. How can I get some honey?
Well, we do have some people who are, Father Lawrence, for example, likes gardening, and so he grows things.
Yeah.
For a while, for a few years, the health department didn't allow us to grow our own food for our guests or students for some
Oh.
health regulations.
Oh.
That has been changed now after I checked further into that. But at one time, we had a full farm, a full mixed farming. We had our own beef, we had our own milk and dairy cows, we had our own hogs, we grew our own grain. We still have our land base, but that's mainly rented out to local farmers who farm the land for us. And we have since disposed of our hogs and of our dairy and of our beef herd.
Chickens.
And chickens. Some of our newcomers did not grow up on a farm like we did. So they come from a city. And so they don't always know how to take care of hogs and milk the cows and stuff like that. And
Right.
so, and also the personnel that we would not have enough. We had even hired some people at the end to take care of some of the animals, milking, etc.
Yeah, it was too big an operation for your numbers as your numbers start to get smaller.
But at one time we were pretty well self-sufficient in terms of growing our own food.
Right. And what about the honey that the bees produce? What winds up happening with that?
Well, at one time when we had our student body here, 100 and more, we had about 20, 25 hives of bees. Right now, I think Father Demetrius takes care of them, and I think he's down to about 3 or 4 hives. So hopefully it's enough honey for ourselves to use in our cooking.
Yeah.
For our spreading at the table. Yeah. And some we give away as gifts and some we sell, but I think it's mainly for our own use right now that we try for our own cooking in the kitchen.
Right. Lawrence's question is for you, just based on the notes that I've read. Who are the men in black?
That was an invention of a number of us monks when we wanted to put a new wrinkle on being chaplains at the college. And that has changed. We are now, myself and one other person who happens to be an Anglican priest, woman. So that's, the college is changing quite a bit. I would say that among our students, we have a mixture of all sorts of religion. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of resistance to coming as not Catholic to this Catholic institution. We even have an IT man who's a Muslim. So that's what's happened to the college on the level of the religious issue. It's trying a little bit like I'm doing in the hospital. I'm Lawrence when it comes to a hospital, a tag on here with no last name even. Yeah. And I'm considered the spiritual care person. That's all. Right. And so what happens, and what is definitely an advantage, is that I meet people on their level and I listen.
Yeah.
And when it's time, I might pull out that card of being a priest or being a Catholic, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obvious, even though just yesterday there was a lady who invited me out of her room. So she wasn't interested in anything that had to do with spiritual care.
That's the politest way I've ever heard put a spin on get out. I invite you out of my room. That's very polite. What's your interaction, if any, with the German culture within Saskatchewan, not just in the area, but do you have anything to say about your roots and how that affects the way you live your life in Saskatchewan today and that German influence?
Pretty well, none of us living here now speak German anymore or can read German. I grew up with the Low German, German-Russian, but this generation doesn't speak that very much anymore. And I would say that after or during World War II, the German tradition was kind of downplayed quite a bit because of the whole the war effort and all that sort of thing.
Right.
So that was not emphasized very much among that generation.
Yeah, well, I would say that's what happened within one generation, and especially because of the wars.
Yeah,
it just disappeared. And I would say that a lot of our parents, like my mother and dad, both spoke the language, but they used it between themselves.
You're right.
And they didn't do it, like it wasn't evident that they were hiding from us, but they used it for external, maybe meeting people who are unilingual German. That's not happening anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do know that for the German Cultural Council, I know that they take tremendous pride in the history of St. Peter's and how that factors into the overall history of Germans in Saskatchewan. So you're definitely on their radar as something that they're tremendously proud of historically.
I must, you want to go ahead?
Well, there was a group in Humboldt, the German, what do they call it?
Heritage Society.
Yeah, and so that was quite lively until recently. I don't know if it's still going even.
I don't think so. They're getting older.
Yeah, it's a group that still had their language from the old country, new Canadians, and they really thrived on this. But lately, the people are dying off, and there's lack of interest to keep it going.
Go ahead.
If I can just add this here. Now, both of us grew up in this area, so we're probably not aware of it, but I've heard visitors and other people that are not from this area that have lived here for a while, and they have said, there's a different kind of culture in the colony.
Yeah.
We have in other places of either Saskatchewan or of Canada, Ontario perhaps. And I think I'm not aware of that because I grew up here, but they say there's just a difference among the people and their attitude and the society that we have here. So that's kind of interesting to hear because I think in most cases, if not all, it's a positive comment that it's a different culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's wonderful to say that we're a melting pot, but we also must remember that we want to remember our unique identity and maintain some of that and some pride in our heritage. And I know that for a lot of the people that I've spoken to within the German community, that is the case.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of Saskatchewan was developed by different ethnic groups in different parts of the province. There's a French part, there's a Ukrainian colony, there's a German colony, several of the different ethnic either religious or ethnic groups that have settled different parts of Saskatchewan.
There's a fantastic church in Gravelbourg, which I'm sure you know of.
Yes, I've been there, yes.
It's so beautiful.
Yes, that's right.
It really is a lovely building. When I drove into Gravelbourg for the first time, I was reminded very much felt like being in a little corner of Quebec. actually. It's definitely a great influence there.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been to the church here in Munster, but I would say it, if not equals it, betters it.
Well, I saw pictures. I have to say, I saw pictures on the website, and I've not. And see, this was the problem. My hope had been that when I finally got around to recording this podcast with you folks, that I'd be doing it there in person. And of course, this would be the worst time of year in the dead of cold to be coming. But I saw pictures of the church, and it looks absolutely stunning. It really does.
There's a German statement over the curve on the ceiling above the sanctuary. Maybe you can give that.
Liebes Petrus, und auf diesen Felsen würde ich meine Kirche bauen.
So that's still there in German.
Meaning?
You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church.
Aha. Oh, okay.
And one of our old priests, his name was Lair. Loehr.
Wow.
And when he was growing up, he thought that the layer cake was something that their family produced.
The layer cake. That's very funny. Tell me about the music ministry there.
The music ministry.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it's not very pronounced, except that we do have two of our monks that play the organ or the piano. So in our liturgical prayer, we usually have accompaniment by the organ and sometimes by the piano as well, too. And so we do have a pipe organ in our church, which is very beautiful. At one time, in the high school days, our Brother Thomas put on musical plays and sponsored musical groups coming here. We don't do that. It's more that kind of activity has moved more to the Humboldt Arts Council and their band. So we don't have the kind of personnel to put that on anymore. But Brother Kirk plays guitar too, so I should add that as well but it's mainly in our liturgical prayers that we use the musical instruments.
Support. Yeah.
Do you remember where the organ came from? I'm always fascinated by the installation of organs in churches, and they usually have they're usually selected very carefully and have a history.
Some parts came from an abandoned organ in Prince Albert.
Yes.
Some parts came from Saskatoon, and other parts I think were brought in new by our organ builder, who was Bill Thurmeyer, who was a monk of this abbey when he started the project. We do have the St. Peter's chorus. That's not connected to the abbey, except that they practice here. But it's based out of basically, I would say, a community choir, and all lay people living in the area. I think this year there's over 50 members that they have. And they've been going for over 50 years.
And it was called St. Peter's Chorus.
And it was started by one of our monks, Brother Thomas.
That's right.
But there's no one direct. He's not here, and he's dead, of course, now. But he started it, directed it, and then it expanded, and it's mainly people, but using the name of St. Peter's Chorus. And they put on a concert, or two, I guess, around Christmas time, and also in May, I think, or June.
Yeah. I remember when I was a student here that the Trapp family actually came here.
Truly. Wow.
Back in 55.
That's the kind of pull we had by that one brother, Thomas, who is such a good musician, that he managed to get them here. And that was true about, there's a magnificent soloist, a woman who came here. I wish I could remember.
Maureen was her first name. Maureen Forster.
Maureen Forster was here, and I
knew Maureen very well. She was an amazing woman.
Yeah, that's right. So their contacts were enriching, incredibly enriching during that period. And for the students, it was wonderful.
I'm curious to know, because I'm assuming there's a fairly large Benedictine order in Europe.
Every 4 years, all the abbots of the world gather in Rome. And that takes place every 4 years at San Anselmo in Rome. And so and there's about 250 monasteries around the world. And so that's a chance to meet some of them. So I certainly have made contacts with some of the German abbots at that place. But otherwise, there's no visiting back and forth. Or
do you remember our roots? They come from Germany.
Metten, Bavaria. Bavaria, Metten.
Yeah. Does the Pope happen to swing by while you're there?
Well, he phones me every Thursday, but other than that, he's often busy. Well, I think in Europe, the monasteries are more, I would say, secluded and stay within their schools that they operate, or whatever the case might be. They don't do a lot of parish or missionary work. In North America, including us in Canada, we were founded with pastoral work in mind. And so we've always had that outreach more so in North America than they have in Europe. And so I think a lot of the traditional image of monks being secluded comes from the European tradition. Now, on the other hand, there's also Benedictine sisters, and they have had much more of a broader outlook or broader outreach, I would say, than the monks necessarily did. But in North America, both men and women were much more involved. Although I would say that the monastery in Quebec and the monastery in British Columbia, the Benedictines, they are much less involved than we have been traditionally. So I guess I have to take some of my words back.
Well, in a sense, that does vary from each congregation. And our tradition coming out of that German reality, I think, was deeply influenced by that. Now, we were asked by John the 23rd to go to Brazil as well. So some of us had spent time in Brazil.
The word oblate within the Benedictine order has a completely different meaning, and it is not the same as the oblate priest order, and more of what I would have been familiar with the term like a layperson. So can you speak on that a little bit about what oblates are within the order?
I would say the more familiar term in other communities is associates. So communities like Benedictines, like Oblates, etc., have a certain type of spirituality that is attractive to different people who are living in the world and may want to simplify or their life or deepen their spirituality in some way. And so a lot of them have associates that gather together 2, 3, or 4 times during the year and just have a chance to discuss among themselves. But Benedictines, our traditional term is Benedictine oblate. And an oblate is someone who offers his life to God in a certain way, but still lives in their own family, lives in their own workplace, tries to integrate a kind of a Benedictine spirit into their own lifestyle. And I say, to me anyway, the two of the central themes of Benedictine spirituality is, first of all, moderation, so you don't go off the radical end one way or the other. Moderation and community life. Yeah. So I think that's, and I would, when I was a novice, all the books that were being written, now this is 60 years ago, all the books that were written were kind of about St. Francis and admiring Franciscan spirituality. That's what I remember. Very little was written about community, about Benedictine spirituality. Today, I would say that there's lots of books written by lay people, oblates in particular, about Benedictine spirituality. And so I think there's, as you had mentioned once before, the kind of emphasis on community life today and being concerned about that is part of that Benedictine influence and the Benedictine calling, I think, that attracts people.
Yes.
St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yes.
was studying his schooling at a Benedictine monastery in Monte Cassino.
Yeah, yeah.
And his parents wanted him to become the abbot there, but he decided to join the Dominicans instead.
Right, right. Are there any Benedictine nuns in the area?
Winnipeg and British Columbia
Mm.
have Benedictine convents,
Mm-hmm.
but they're getting quite low in number as well, too.
Yeah, that sounds like
None in Saskatchewan.
the numbers really sound like it's your biggest challenge right now.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully you get so many inquiries. Hopefully some of those inquiries will translate to people coming to visit and realizing that this is in fact a life that they would like to choose for themselves so that you can continue to grow.
Well, we hope and pray.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate so much the opportunity to chat with you both and to learn a little bit about your life. I find it very interesting. I admire the commitment. It's not something that just anyone could do, and I know that the commitment comes from a great place of faith and dedication, and which I'm sure has not always been easy. But it is a life that has stood you all in good stead and given you a tremendous amount of joy and peace and happiness. So that's quite evident in talking to you both, and I appreciate you letting me in on your world a little bit and being so open to doing so that you're not you don't feel like people are gawking in on you. I come from this out of a sense of curiosity and out of respect. Truly, in talking to you both, absolutely. So
Thank you.
and
Good talking to you as well.
I hope that I get a chance to be there in the summer and at least get a spoonful of honey.
That's great.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so thank you. It's such a pleasure to chat.
I can even serve you a few garlic.
Do you guys grow garlic there?
You betcha.
Oh, there's nothing like fresh garlic. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much. Hey, thanks for listening. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. SaskScapes can be downloaded from iTunes, Google Play, the SaskScapes app for Android devices, and all of the other major podcasting apps. Stop by and say hi to us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter @SaskScapes. So tell me, what fuels the culture in your community? Who has a story that must be heard? Consider bringing SaskScapes to your part of the province. Email us at saskapes@gmail.com or find us on Facebook. Please share your thoughts on this episode or any of the episodes by writing a review in the iTunes Store or Google Play. Your star ratings help our audience grow. Remember, our stories are our legacy. Now, somewhere around the world for years to come, stories like those found in SaskScapes are being heard. Think about it. We're creating an oral archive so that who we are in this province is never forgotten. I'm Kevin Power. Join me again next time.